You've been a problem since day one." That was the last thing he said to me. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It was said plainly without emotion, like reporting the weather. "My name is Eric Danner. I'm 41. I was the lead financial compliance officer at a mid-sized tech company based in Austin. I had been there for 6 years. Before that day, I thought I was doing well. I believed in the numbers and precision in doing the right thing, even if no one was watching. I thought that was what I was paid for. I didn't know I was being watched." The message came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because the break room still had leftover donuts from the weekly all-hands. A cherry-glazed one sat beside my coffee. I hadn't touched it yet. "You're being let go," the director said. He didn't look me in the eye. His screen was still open to Slack. I saw my name highlighted in a thread I wasn't part of. The reason is ongoing failure to collaborate across teams, a pattern of disruptive behavior, and a lack of alignment with company culture. My ears didn't register it all at once. It was like trying to swallow broken glass while smiling. That's what corporate does. It wants you silent, agreeable, and fired without blood on the floor. I stared at my coffee and thought about how I'd never finish it. How many times had I refilled that mug week after week, believing this office was something close to stable? How many emails had I sent with, per my last message, or just circling back, thinking I was building trust? I didn't speak. Not right away. He was expecting me to argue. That was the trap. The moment I became loud, I'd become the very disruption they accused me of being. So I nodded. I asked for the written statement. He handed me the printout like it had been ready for days. I packed up slowly. My keycard stopped working before I reached the parking garage. I had to buzz through and lie to security pretending I'd forgotten something. They say this kind of thing happens suddenly. It doesn't. The ground had been cracking for months. I just hadn't been listening. It started with a spreadsheet, one line item. Q3 procurement discrepancies, 248, 6-32, marked as vendor integration expenses. The line item wasn't mine, but the audit was, and I couldn't reconcile the invoice trail. I asked politely then, persistently. The answers were vague. "That's above your level. Talk to ops. Just trust the process." I didn't. I flagged the expense in the quarterly report draft. I noted that the supporting documents were inconsistent with prior patterns and vendor terms. That's when the meetings started changing. People stopped replying to calendar invites. My access to shared folders became selective. One day, the Q4 projections sheet had 20 tabs. The next, I could only see 7. IT said it was a permissions bug. I knew better. The head of sales, Mark, started forgetting to loop me in. He was charming in a way that always made me feel like furniture. Friendly, smooth, unreadable. The kind of guy who remembers your kid's name just enough to weaponize it. He started telling people I was overstepping, that I was turning minor accounting issues into witch hunts, that I had a control problem. I was just doing my job. One night, I stayed later than I ever had. I knew cleaning crews would come through, but I needed the quiet. I needed the stillness to check the numbers again. The procurement discrepancy had duplicated. Another vendor, same month. $111.92 this time, same signature. I printed both forms and brought them to the next manager huddle. I didn't make an accusation. I asked a question. By the end of that week, I was uninvited from all budgetary meetings. By the end of the month, HR had me flagged for aggressive correspondence. I reread my emails. There was no profanity, no threats, just facts, timelines, screenshots, questions. The truth makes people nervous when they've invested in pretending. I remember sitting alone in my car one night with the printouts on the passenger seat. I thought about burning them, about letting it go. I imagined how easy it would be to start over somewhere quieter, maybe a smaller firm, maybe freelance auditing. No offices, no politics, just numbers. But I didn't burn them. I bought a binder instead. If I'm honest, I didn't think of it as revenge. Not then. I thought of it as self-respect. If I was going to be erased, I wanted a record, not for court, not even for vindication, just for myself, a way to say I wasn't crazy. I saw it. I knew. I kept the truth. I didn't know yet that I'd be keeping a lot more than printouts. The next time I saw Mark, he smiled too brightly, called me buddy, told me I'd been doing a hell of a job keeping things tight. My stomach turned. He leaned against my desk like we were allies. Then he said, "Some things are better left off paper, just between us guys." I knew then what kind of game I was in, and I knew I wasn't playing anymore. I didn't answer him, not with words. I just looked at him. Not the way I usually did, half listening while trying to keep the peace. No. This time, I looked straight through him. I wanted him to feel it, that something had changed, that I wasn't on his team anymore, that maybe I never had been. He didn't like that. That week, I found my name removed from the distribution list for the compliance reports I used to oversee. My Slack DMs stopped delivering. I got a new calendar invite titled Alignment Coaching, led by someone I'd never met before. Some consultant from HQ who smiled too much and asked me how I could better support the energy of collaboration. The walls weren't closing in. They were already closed. I was just starting to notice the lack of air. Still, I played along, at least on the outside. I nodded through the coaching session. I took notes. I said things like, "I see what you mean, and I'll take that to heart," even though everything inside me wanted to scream. I went home and wrote everything down, every phrase they used, every tactic, every shifting goalpost. They thought they were documenting me, but I was documenting them. My wife, Jenna, noticed the change. She didn't ask directly, not at first, but I caught her watching me. Those long pauses at dinner, the way she'd start a sentence and not finish it. One night she said, "You don't talk about work anymore." I said, "There's nothing to talk about." It was a lie, and we both knew it. But how do you explain to someone that you're being slowly erased in plain sight? That people you once shared team lunches with are now pretending you don't exist? That you walk into meetings and feel the temperature drop like you've become the ghost of someone still technically employed? You don't explain that. You live it until it eats the parts of you that used to believe in fairness. The tipping point came in November. I got a call, an internal number, from a woman in HR I barely knew. Her voice was tight, like she was reading off a script she didn't write. "We've received multiple concerns about your interpersonal tone." I asked. Which interactions, she wouldn't say. I asked. What exactly was said, she wouldn't answer. I said, "Can I see the complaints?" She said, "They were verbal." So I asked, "Is there any evidence?" She paused. "Eric, the goal here is not punishment, it's growth." I felt it then, the click of the final lock. I said nothing else. I thanked her for the call. I ended it politely. Then I sat still for a long time, just listening to the silence in my office. That's when I began backing everything up. Every email, every version of the reports, every calendar invite and meeting note, even the Slack chats. I exported what I could and screen captured what I couldn't. I stored them on an encrypted drive that I kept at home. I didn't send anything out. Not yet. I wasn't trying to go viral. I wasn't looking to sue. I just wanted to be able to look in the mirror and know I wasn't crazy. It was lonely work, the kind that doesn't come with applause or closure. It felt like hiding in plain sight, smiling at people who wanted you gone while quietly assembling the bones of a truth you couldn't yet tell. I started talking less in meetings. Let them think I'd accepted defeat. Let them believe I was folding. Inside, I was learning. Every system has a rhythm. And once you understand the rhythm, you can hear the lies. Like the sudden delay in releasing the Q4 report, or the last-minute reclassification of certain expenses, or the way Mark's team started sending spreadsheets as PDFs uneditable, locked behind passwords that didn't work. All of it told me the same thing: they were preparing something, and they didn't want me in the room when it landed. So I waited, and then came the exit. "You've been a problem since day one." I left with my binder, my laptop was returned, my access revoked, my Slack deactivated by the time I reached the lobby. But they couldn't erase what I knew. They couldn't unsign the contracts. They couldn't rewrite the budget logs. They couldn't unmerge the spreadsheets I'd already decrypted. At home, I told Jenna everything. I thought she'd be scared. She wasn't. She looked at me the way she used to before the tension, before the silence. She said, "Good. Now tell the truth." I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, from clarity. There's a kind of quiet that comes after you've been cast out, after the emails stop, after the tension breaks, and no one is pretending anymore. You realize that the worst part wasn't the firing. It was the months of slowly becoming invisible, the erosion of your voice, the self-doubt. But I had the binder, I had the files, and I had time. The next morning, I opened a blank document, not to report them, not yet. I started writing a timeline. Day by day, I laid it out. When the discrepancies started, who signed what, when I flagged them, who responded how. I wasn't dramatizing anything. I wasn't editorializing, just the facts, line by line like an accountant reconstructing a fire. I had 17 pages by lunch. I reached out to an old colleague, Naomi. She used to work compliance before she transferred to another firm. We weren't close, but she had always played things straight. I asked her if she'd be willing to take a look at something in confidence. She agreed. We met at a diner somewhere neutral, where neither of us would be recognized. I brought a printed copy of the timeline and 2 key supporting documents. She read in silence for 23 minutes. I watched her hands. They stayed still. No shaking, no fidgeting. That told me more than her face did. When she finished, she said, "This is serious." I asked, "Am I overreacting?" She didn't answer immediately, just leaned back and said, "This could be enough for an SEC inquiry." I hadn't even thought that far. All I had wanted was not to feel crazy, not to go under alone unheard. I asked her what I should do. She gave me 3 options: bury it, leak it, or report it through official channels and be ready for a storm. I thanked her. She didn't press. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The idea of going public made my skin crawl. I didn't want to become a headline. I didn't want cameras or interviews or lawyers. I wasn't a whistleblower. I wasn't brave. But I also wasn't going to let them erase me. So I started with something small. I wrote an anonymous tip to the internal ethics hotline. I included no names, just dates, discrepancies, and hints. I attached redacted screenshots. I knew the system logged submitter IPs. I used a VPN. I knew the kind of firewall they had. The tip would reach someone, maybe. But I didn't stop there. I created a private email account and sent the same information to an external auditing body I knew worked with firms like ours. Again, no names, just breadcrumbs. Just enough for someone to look closer. I wasn't naive. I knew how slow these wheels turned. But I also knew how systems panic when they realize they're not in control of the narrative anymore. It took 2 weeks. Then I got a message. An anonymous inbox I'd set up for. Replies lit up with a subject line that simply read, "Review initiated." No signature, no threat, no promise. Just the beginning. I didn't smile when I read it. There was no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a slow exhale like surfacing after holding your breath underwater for too long. I closed the laptop and sat with the quiet. Jenna was asleep in the other room. I didn't wake her. There was nothing to celebrate. I hadn't won anything, but something had started. The next few days were uneventful on the surface. I cooked breakfast. I cleaned the shed like I'd been meaning to. I applied to 2 jobs I didn't really want. I answered polite rejection emails from recruiters who had seen the corporate termination on my record and decided that was enough. But behind that, something was moving. On a Thursday morning, I got a message from a blocked number. 1 line, "Your reports have reached the board." I didn't know who sent it. Still don't. But I recognized the cadence, someone inside, someone who didn't want to be known, but wanted me to know I wasn't wasting my time. The following Monday, I received a cease and desist, not from the board, from the company's legal department. They accused me of breaching my confidentiality agreement, of retaining proprietary information, of conducting actions detrimental to the company's public image. The language was aggressive, but careful, no direct accusation of leaking. Just a shot across the bow. I took it to a lawyer. I'd never needed one before, not like this. He read it, nodded slowly, and said, "They're nervous." I asked, "Should I be?" He said, "Not if everything you have is real." "Is it?" I nodded. "Every file, every timestamp, every entry." He leaned back. "Then we don't flinch." That night, Jenna poured me a glass of wine and said, "You didn't do anything wrong." I almost believed her. But even when you're right, they make you feel dirty. That's the worst part. They drag your name through the process so thoroughly that by the time you're proven correct, you're too exhausted to care. Still, I kept going. 2 weeks later, I received word again, anonymously, that an internal investigation had been launched. Quietly, no press, no HR-wide announcements. Just a sealed memo circulating behind closed doors, referencing irregularities in vendor contracting and potential non-compliance with fiscal oversight. Mark's name wasn't in the memo, but I knew they were looking in his direction. I also knew it wasn't over, because people like Mark don't just fold, they double down. I heard about the wellness leave through someone else, a friend of a friend in HR. They said Mark had taken it suddenly, stress-related, the memo read. No one said the word investigation. They didn't have to. I knew what was happening. He wasn't being punished. He was being protected. That's what they do. Move people sideways. Give them soft exits. Let them resign with grace so the company doesn't have to stain its own name with the truth. The real punishment. That's reserved for people like me. The ones who spoke up. The ones who didn't understand their role was to shut up and nod. But I had stopped nodding months ago. Then the leaks began. Not from me, but someone else had started pushing things upward. A former assistant on the vendor team, I think. Maybe someone who saw one of the same documents I did. Maybe someone who heard the same jokes in hallways, the same closed-door silences when numbers didn't add up. Whatever it was, stories started circulating. Quiet at first. Whispers in industry newsletters. A Substack post. A tweet that vanished a few hours later. But the damage was done. People had seen it. People were talking. I watched all of it from my small desk at home. I didn't comment. I didn't share. I didn't reach out to journalists. That wasn't the point. I wasn't here to burn it all down. I just wanted the truth to have oxygen. By mid-January, 3 more directors had taken leaves of absence. One of them I knew personally. She'd been in the room when I first flagged the procurement numbers. She'd nodded at me like she agreed, then looked away when Mark laughed it off. Another silence. They were all complicit in some way. Not always directly, but they knew. They felt it, the way the air changes when power moves unethically through a system. And they chose not to breathe too deeply. Now they were coughing. And I had stopped trying to clear my name. I didn't need to anymore. It wasn't about vindication. It was about survival. The version of me that sat through coaching sessions, that apologized for sending too many emails, that shrank himself to stay employed. That version had died in the conference room the day they printed out my exit papers before telling me I was fired. I was becoming someone else now. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. I spent my afternoons walking, not far, just around the neighborhood, letting my mind settle into the rhythm of footsteps. I stopped checking my phone every hour, stopped refreshing email, stopped measuring my worth by unread messages or unopened opportunities. Something in me had been rewired, and yet I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace, and slowly I was finding it. Then one morning, almost 3 months after I was let go, I received an envelope. No return address. Handwritten. No markings except my name and an old P.O. box I hadn't used in years. I almost threw it out. But something about the weight of the paper made me pause. It felt deliberate, inside a single printed sheet. No greeting, no signature, just a paragraph typed in a clean serif font. You weren't wrong. We all saw it. We just didn't say anything. You were the only one who did, and we let them make you pay for it. I'm sorry. I hope you don't carry it forever. That was it. No name. No clue who had sent it. But I knew it came from inside. The phrasing, the timing, the guilt. And in a strange way, it meant more to me than anything formal ever could. I sat with that letter for a long time, not because it changed anything, but because it reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the shift in their eyes, the silent meetings, the locked folders, the emails that vanished. I hadn't imagined the way my job was slowly peeled away from me, like skin from fruit, quietly, efficiently, as if I were the problem, not the infection they were hiding. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had stayed silent. And now, months later, they were reaching through the wreckage just to say, "You were right." It didn't fix what had happened, but it made me breathe a little easier. That same week, I received a message from a recruiter, a different tone this time. She had seen my resume, and more importantly, she had heard from someone about what I'd done. Not the leaks, not the drama, the work, the ethics, the refusal to sign off on numbers that didn't make sense. She said they were building a team, a new division, quiet, focused, integrity first, and they wanted me to lead it. I didn't say yes right away. I needed to really know that I wasn't just running from one fire into another. So I asked hard questions about transparency, about their whistleblower policy, about oversight. I watched how they answered, not what they said, how they said it. And when I finally accepted the offer, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt ready, not to rebuild what I had before, but to build something better, something honest. Not perfect, but real. I never told anyone at the new job the full story, not because I was hiding it, but because it no longer defined me. The binder stayed on a shelf in my study untouched, now its pages yellowing slightly at the edges. I didn't burn it. I didn't need to. It wasn't a weapon anymore, just a memory, a record of a time when I chose truth over comfort. Some nights I still think about the moment they called me not a team player. How easily that phrase can become a verdict, a mask, a weapon. But I understand it now. What they meant was I didn't lie like the rest of them. I didn't laugh at the right moments. I didn't stay quiet when it would have been easier. I didn't trade my name for their approval. And maybe that made me dangerous. But it also made me free. There's a kind of stillness that comes after everything falls apart. Not peace, not at first, but space, a clearing. And if you wait long enough, if you breathe through the silence, you start to hear something else. Your own voice returning. Not loud, not bitter, just steady and true. So no, I wasn't a team player. I was the only one telling the truth. And now, finally, I can live with that.